Well, it's very exciting today to be joined by Don McLaughlin, the former mayor of Uvalde, who certainly believes in a thorough and proper and tough immigration policy. Don, if I may, tell me, you think Joe Biden's policy is feeble, but you're not that impressed by some of your fellow Republicans in Texas, are you?
Well, I mean, this administration has been so soft on immigration. I mean, you know, the sad part about it is we've got these illegal immigrants coming over now, and they have more rights than our own citizens do. They're taken better care of than our own citizens, and it's gotten way out of hand. Our governor has really cracked down here lately and put a stop to it and started defending the rights of American citizens and the people of Texas.
Okay. And that's probably going to be another.
It sounds almost as bad as it is here, with the rights of people who come in illegally being put ahead of those of the people living here who pay their taxes to fund them. What would you like to see done? How do you think the illegal migration problem can be solved?
Well, I mean, we could solve it tomorrow if we would just enforce the current laws that are on the book. You know, the only people benefiting from this migration is the cartels themselves that are charging all these people to come over here, charging them a huge sum. And if we would just enforce the laws that we already have on our books in the United States, we wouldn't have this problem.
And there's a law, SB 4 in Texas, that would allow the police to arrest illegal immigrants. Now, that's been suspended by the Supreme Court. What are their grounds for suspension?
I don't know. I haven't seen what their grounds are for suspension yet. Of course, I mean, the argument from this administration is that immigration is their authority. Well, when they don't enforce their own rules and their own laws, then somebody has to pick up the slack, and unfortunately, that's fallen on the burden of the state of Texas.
But it seems obvious that if the migration is illegal, then people are committing a crime because they're in a place they're not entitled to be. Surely it's the natural job of the police to enforce the law.
Most definitely. I mean, that's the problem. There's no accountability with this, and we're bringing these people over. They break the law coming over. So that's why we're starting to see the problems that we're having in cities across the United States where they think they're above the law and don't have to abide by it. So, you know, our state legislature got together and said, you know, if the federal government's not going to do it, then we're going to give our officers the authority to arrest and send them back to across the border.
And your view seems to be very popular. You've had a very successful primary campaign. You've got 58% of the vote. I get just over 50% in my constituency, so I know any politician who gets well over 50% is on the right track. So you're pushing in the way the people want to go. Why do you think the Democrats are so mealy-mouthed about migration?
You know, it's sad to say, but the only thing you can think of is, are they trying to bring more people in here so they can get more votes to retain power? Because it makes no sense. I mean, just the bill they blocked yesterday that Senator Durbin blocked in Illinois on the Senate floor, where Senator Ernest passed a bill that if you're an illegal immigrant in this country and commit a serious crime of murder or assault, that you would be deported immediately. And the Democrats blocked that on the floor. Why? All she was trying to do was take care of people. We've had young people that have been murdered here lately by illegal immigrants.
But on the other hand, the Democrats, Biden is saying that the Republicans blocking the immigration bill are playing politics in an election year, and he would be tougher if the Republicans would help him. Isn't that a bit far-fetched, really?
I think it's way far-fetched, because the bill that they passed out, that they negotiated, took all the powers away from us, gave it all to the president. He made this promise that I'll enforce them immediately if you give me this extra power. Well, he hadn't done anything now. He already has the power. He has the power to do executive action. He hadn't used it yet. Why would we give him more power and lose all control of any say in anything that we're doing?
And what are you seeking to do as you stand for election? How directly do you think you can influence things? Is it by being a voice for the electorate at large, or is it by what you can do legislatively?
Well, it's both. I mean, you know, one thing about it, with me, what you get is what you see, and I'm going to call it like I see it. And and I think that's what most people want nowadays. They're tired of getting the lip service and being told that we're going to do this for you, we're going to do that for you, and then they get the person elected and they do nothing. With me, I'll be very vocal on it. I'm not afraid to sit down and debate about it. I've dealt with this immigration in the last 10 years, as mayor prior to running for this seat.
And the Republicans are reasonably strong on this. But tell me what's been going on in Arizona, where the Arizona governor, Katie Hobbs, isn't so tough on immigration. What are the Arizona Republicans going to try and do about that?
Well, I mean, they've introduced bills to enforce the laws that are on the deal. And again, why would you not? I mean, if you look at some of these states, now they're citizens. Some of them are even having to lay off their own employees. Some of these cities are having to lay off, employees so they can take care of the migrants. I mean, that's wrong. I mean, we need to be strong. Look, I'm not anti-immigration, but there's a right way and a wrong way to do it. And we can't save the world when we've got problems in our own country that we're not addressing. And I don't know what her thinking is.
Absolutely, and as you were saying, the burden then falls on domestic taxpayers who have to pick up the pieces. But you also want, as I would want, migrants, whether legal or illegal, to be safe when they get into the country. Do you know anything about the Laken Riley death in Georgia? How does that relate to this overall problem?
Well, it's the same old thing, because we're taking these migrants and we're just turning them loose in our country. We know nothing about them. We have no history on them. We don't know any of their criminal past. They want to make it like it's families all the time that are coming over here. It's not. Most of them are military-aged males that are crossing more than anything, and there's no background checks, and they're not doing anything to find out who these people are. If you look at most of these people, they've entered, in Venezuela and Cuba and different things, they emptied their prisons and sent them over here to the U.S. to be released in our country, and we've gladly released them with no check and balance system in place.
And so people come in who have a criminal record, and then somebody like Laken Riley is at risk. And that, I mean, this has happened in the UK as well. We've had illegal immigrants come over who then turn out to commit crimes. And the very nature of illegality and the people trafficking must surely increase the risk of criminals getting through.
Oh, it does. Well, I mean, I can tell you from experience right here in Uvalde, when we would stop the trains here in Uvalde, we caught murderers, we caught pedophiles, we caught rapists, we caught drug dealers that all have been convicted and kicked out of the United States. And we catch them again and we turn them over to Border Patrol, and their higher management tells them, well, just fill out their paperwork and turn them loose. We shouldn't be doing that in our country. These people were already expelled from our country for these problems, and now they're coming right back in.
Well, Don, I think your constituents are lucky to have a spokesman like you to put these arguments so clearly. You remind me in UK politics of my friend Lee Anderson, who similarly stand up for his constituents. Thank you for joining me, and very good luck in your election.
Well, thank you very much, and God bless y'all, and have a great day.
Welcome back to GBN America, where I'm really very excited to be able to talk to Chief Chris Clem, who has been in charge of border operations in Texas and in Arizona for 27 and a half years. And this is such a topical matter of discussion, not just in the United States, but in other countries across the world. And Chris, if I may, can you tell me what you saw over those 27 and a half years and how difficult it is to keep a border secure?
Well, great question, and I will just tell you that the border has always been dynamic and fluid, and so it's been an evolution over the course of the 27 and a half years that I served as a Border Patrol agent and then finally as the Chief Patrol Agent in Yuma. The biggest thing that I think is important, and you kind of touched on in the intro, it's a world problem. Initially, when I first got on board with the Border Patrol in the late 90s, 1995 actually, we were dealing with a lot of single adult Mexican national men, that were really coming to look for work, mainly agricultural work and labor work. We started seeing an evolution in the early 2000s of a lot of Central American men, and then a lot of family units in the 2000 and teens. And then over the last few years, it has really been a world problem. In my section of southwestern Arizona and southeastern California, 126 linear border miles, we had over 116 different countries, and rarely did Mexico or Central America make my top 10 on a weekly basis. So it became a world phenomenon, and it has impacted our border security operations. And I think that's one of the biggest keys and takeaways when we discuss the current situation in the United States is we have a border security problem that we need to secure our border, but also we have an immigration issue that we need to address. And unfortunately, the two often get conflated, and that causes the political quagmire that we're in, and why we have a trouble getting some of the results I think we need.
And how much did things change once President Biden came in with his very different language on immigration and on border control to the former President Trump?
Well, it was a big change. And as I mentioned, I came in 1995. I worked for 5 U.S. presidential administrations: Clinton, Bush, Obama, Trump, and then Biden. And every administration had leaned forward by working towards a more secure and safe border environment, whether that was increasing in personnel, but most importantly, infrastructure in the form of border barriers, whether as we call it a wall or a fence, it was still some kind of structure, access roads, technology in the form of lights, cameras, and sensors. And all of that system really got steamrolling at the end of Obama's or the beginning of Obama's term, and then really took off when President Trump came in, because he had campaigned on building a wall and securing the border. But the wall system, and I think this is very important, it was more than just a wall to Border Patrol agents. It was the lights, the cameras, the technology, and the access roads, and the strong policies about consequences. And unfortunately, President Biden campaigned on the rhetoric and the vitriol and the divisiveness that a secure border has happened in American politics. And so in his first few hours and first days as president, he halted so much of the things that President Trump had implemented, which I want everybody to understand. These were requirements by the U.S. Border Patrol, by the U.S. Border Patrol agents. These weren't political requirements by elected officials or bureaucrats. This is what the men and women that I led said, Chief, this is what we need in our area. And this is what we packaged up. And that's what President Trump put in place. And unfortunately, President Biden stopped everything and rolled a lot of policies back that led to some of the challenges and really the crisis that we have today.
But since then, he's done something of a U-turn, hasn't he? He's realised that didn't work, and things like sending illegal immigrants to New York has begun to make the Liberals more concerned about it. So in the election in November, will there be a lot of difference between the Trump and Biden positions, do you think?
Well, I can tell you talk is cheap. We've heard him talk about that, this is President Biden talked about on day one, he put something forward. He put an immigration package together, which is fine. But, again, he's conflating immigration and border security. We have to start with the secure border first before we take on any new immigration policies. And what you're seeing now, this U-turn is really a political U-turn, because his polling numbers have been so low in so many categories, but really the numbers and the polls actually, saying that, hey, the border is a problem has hit an all-time high under this administration. So, it's we're 8 or 9 months out from Election Day, and so this is important to him to try to make at least a forward-facing attempt. But there's been no progress, no significant changes, and that to that piece about the migrants showing up in places like New York City, it's not a good place for us to be, to have to use that as an example to open people's eyes. But unfortunately, that's the reality that border communities have been facing the last 3 years under this administration. And if you're going to, claim that you're a sanctuary city and you welcome all these migrants, then if that's what it took to wake up some people and wake up this administration's supporters, then I think it will be worth it in the long game, because we need to secure our border and we need to come up with some better, more efficient pathways for lawful migration.
And one of the most extraordinary things I've read about border control is the 320,000 people who've been secretly granted admittance to the United States. How did that come about? How can that happen on a secret basis without everybody knowing about it and it going through proper processes?
Well, I know there's a lot of things in our immigration law that are very convoluted and difficult, and they're that way for a reason. They're structured for the right reasons. And parole, which is what this policy or program that the Secretary and the administration used, was designed for limited humanitarian reasons, for circumstances that are deemed advantageous to the United States. I can tell you that there are times where, as chief patrol agent, I would parole people in that would be witnesses to an investigation, or may have been victims of a crime that we were investigating as far as a smuggling scheme. It wasn't designed to broad brush an entire demographic at that level. I mean, they've really created their own little bypass on congressionally, approved laws, and that's how the U.S. Government works. Congress approves the law; the executive branch is supposed to execute. And yeah, that's a big impact. And what it did is in their eyes, it looked like it made a difference by reducing the number of people that arrived illegally at the border. But all it did is give them a jump in line. They're going to get here. They're going to get work permits, but they're only going to be admitted for 2 years. They won't be able to claim asylum. They won't be able to do the things that people think they may be able to do. So unless the president agrees to extend that 2-year parole, they're going to have to go back. And, that in itself is going to be another challenge that we put these migrants in for political expediency. And so, yeah, I think that was one of the tenets on the impeachment of Secretary Mayorkas was this parole.
And that ties in very much with what you were saying about talk being cheap, that it's very easy to say you want a tougher immigration policy, but if at the same time your action is that you're letting in 320,000 people, that shows that you're not really serious about control.
Well, and that's just the 320,000 that we are aware of that were paroled in under this program. We still have apprehended over 1 million people since the start of our federal fiscal year in October. We still have 100,000 people that have gotten away that we don't know what happened to, on top of the other 1.6 million, 2.2 million, 2.4 million people that have come in the first 3 years of this administration. So until I see, the technology and the construction begin to secure the border where it makes sense, where we need it, then I'll recognize that this administration has stepped up. But right now, it's a lot of trying to patch some leaks that they've created. They like to point fingers, but at the end of the day, 25 years of a very, I would say, forward-leaning border security system was being built until President Biden came in and inherited this, what I would say, one of the best systems that we had in my career, only to have it, taken apart or, almost halted completely. So the finger pointing happens in politics all around the world, and that's what's happening right now.
And border control isn't just about people, is it? It's also about goods and illegal goods. And there's been a huge problem with fentanyl coming in. And as I understand it, there are scanners available that could check for fentanyl, but they're sitting in warehouses. So this dangerous drug that criminal gangs make a lot of money out of is coming into the United States in large quantities and isn't being properly controlled. Was that something you were also fighting as you were chief of the border?
Well, yeah. So just to make sure we're very clear on this, is at the ports of entry where the lawful trade and travel, the commerce piece happens, That is where a lot of the technology that you're mentioning was destined for. And about a little over 50% of the dangerous drugs like the fentanyl that does get seized happens at those ports of entry. The remaining 48%, if you will, happens between the ports. The technology that has made some of the headlines that's sitting in the warehouses, that's at the ports, and they're claiming that there's a shortfall in funding. It's why they can't, use it. Well, I would say that the shortfall is because they have, moved a lot of money from different programs. The Department of Homeland Security, I think their budget was just shy of $100 billion last year. I find it hard to believe that they couldn't find the money, as much money as we are giving to nonprofit organizations, sanctuary cities, and to facilitate migrant processing. If they were serious about enforcement, they would have prioritized that to make sure that the money was there so they could operate the technology to save lives, to keep this poison out of our country. But every bill and every language all the language I've read specifically out of this administration and their supporters has been about migrant facilities, migrant processing, and very limited on enforcement technologies.
And one of the other problems with criminal gangs isn't just fentanyl, but it's people trafficking. And I know that 228 suspects have been arrested in a recent undercover operation in Polk County, Florida. You must have been involved in these operations. How closely do you manage, or did your agents manage to embed themselves in the criminal gangs? And how did you get the wrongdoers and bring them to justice?
Well, the Border Patrol agents weren't always involved in some of these undercover operations, especially in areas, off the southwest border. But what I will tell you is that state, local, and federal officials were all going to work together to go after these criminal elements and these traffickers beyond the border once they've made it in. The problem we have when you have all these trafficking situations like you're mentioning in Florida is the volume of people that have come into the United States illegally, the huge mass of people, the tsunami of people. It requires Border Patrol agents to arrest and process, and because the numbers are overwhelming, we don't often get the opportunity to do the questioning or look at something maybe a second or third time that we would normally do if the flow of people was smaller down to a trickle. This is the problem, and many of the migrants that are coming to the United States are, I would say all of them, I know this, at least the ones I dealt with, are paying a smuggling organization to get here. And so they don't realize that they may be victims of trafficking until it's too late. And so there is that in itself is a problem. And that's why you're seeing, this case like in Polk County, Florida, that many people involved in some kind of trafficking or sextortion. And many of this is part of some of the payoffs that these migrants have to make just to get to the United States. And so when you don't secure the border, when you make it about rhetoric and about political points, you're actually putting people's lives at stake because they fall into the hands of human smugglers and traffickers, and they exploit them. And oftentimes, as I mentioned just a moment ago, they don't know they're victims of trafficking until it's too late. And this example in Florida is a prime case of that.
What you say is so important, that woolly-minded liberals think they're being kind by allowing criminal gangs to flourish because they don't have the mental toughness to enforce the law. Well, Chief Chris Clem, thank you so much for joining me, and also for an amazing career of public service that the United States is lucky to have people like you trying to secure its borders. Thank you very much.